Hey everybody, my name's Sean.
And I'm Andy.
And this is the Commander's Brew. This episode, Wizards Tribal. Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Commander's Brew. As you heard, this episode is all about Wizards Tribal.
Yeah, and as you know, this is the show where we take a specific card or theme, and we're going to build two different decks with different ideas based around that same either theme or specific card or whatever. And Wizards Tribal specifically is what we went with this episode.
And as always, we will always build budget decks.
Yes.
No card in this deck is going to be over $10. In fact, for this episode, I don't think any card tops $3 or $4.
Yeah, in this one, I think, it's very rare to find one over $5 in this one.
Right. Let's get to it. Let's see how we did it. So let's cover the two angles that we approached for building these decks.
Yes. So first of all, just to back it up even a tiny bit more, we wanted to take kind of a little bit more of an obscure tribe. And
yeah,
they're not super obscure, but as you'll see especially with what Sean did, we definitely have an obscure build from Sean. We didn't want to do like goblins, elves, that sort of thing. So we took one that is definitely more budgety, wizards. Maybe you don't see this one quite as often at your local EDH play group.
So we decided to divide it by color base. We just picked some commanders that had some different slices of the color pie. So Andy, what colors did you take?
So I decided to sort of half base this around a deck that I already have, actually. And I've noticed that the wizard synergies in it currently are really great, and they really work out. So the commander that I picked and the colors I picked are Bant, which is green, white, blue. So I went with Derevi, Empyrial Tactician from the 2013 Commander series, and which is a card that is a very high power level and banned in 1v1. So
oh wow,
you can't play this one in 1v1. Just a heads up.
What does Derevi do?
So Derevi is a 2/3 flyer for Bant, which is again green, white, blue, and it has flying. She's a bird wizard, which is really a big reason why I picked her. Whenever Derevi Empyrial Tactician enters the battlefield, or a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may tap or untap target permanent.
Wow.
Which is very good. As you'll see, wizards want to do a lot of tapping and untapping.
Great.
And then it has the completely broken text added onto that, which is an activated ability for one colorless and green, white, blue. Put Derevi onto the battlefield from the command zone. She will never cost more than 4 to cast, and you can even sort of, quote, cast her at instant speed.
Whoa.
From the command zone.
I didn't even thought of that.
At any point. So
Yikes.
That part's a little broken. We don't really focus too hard on that, although it's just a super nice bonus, obviously.
And I went with Triad of Fates. Triad of Fates is a 3/3 that's going to cost you 2 white, black. And there's 3 abilities, each that taps. The first one is tap to put a fate counter on a target creature. And then you can tap with the white to exile target creature with a fate counter on it. And then it comes back under its owner's control, so you can bounce it. Or you can pay black and exile target creature with a fate counter on it, and its controller draws 2 cards. Naturally, I want to take advantage of those things, so lots of stuff to untap stuff. And I decided to kind of put a little bit of a token sub-theme so that I could take advantage of exiling my own stuff with little loss for a 2-card benefit.
That makes a lot of sense. This card looks like it was built for Commander.
Kind of does.
It's a legendary creature. It's multicolored. It's got 3 abilities on it. Those are usually prime Commander cards, but I have never seen this card in a Commander deck or as a Commander yet.
I don't even remember it from Theros Block.
I remember it, and I remember everyone hating it.
Okay.
Because it's so slow.
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge for me, besides the fact that there are not a lot of white and black wizards.
So let's talk about the challenges you had with this deck, first of all, because yours is a very interesting build, and I want to talk about it. So first challenge, you're not using blue.
Right, I'm not using blue, which is the main wizard color.
Known as a blue tribe. This is like trying to build a goblins deck with, like, I don't know,
without red,
green, white, or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not a lot of them exist. So when you're building it, I know when we were like looking to cut and stuff, and you're asking me about it, it's like, well, we can't cut that. It's one of the only wizards in the deck.
I know. Yeah. So I decided to take a little bit of a cheat here, and I decided to consider clerics as wizards too. So like between wizards and clerics, this is a tribal deck. But if you're only looking at wizards alone, maybe there's not enough for your typical tribal deck.
You tried your hardest to stick to wizards, and I think you did a pretty good job, actually.
Yeah, man, especially if you count clerics too.
Well, we can't really do that.
Well,
but
we can't literally, but sure.
but yeah, so that's your first challenge, and then of course you have the challenge of just the mechanics on this commander are very slow, and like the fact that they have to tap, even if
She has to tap.
Only one of the abilities had tap, or the other two were tapping.
Yeah,
Like,
I
that
really
would've been
would
okay?
love it if you could put fate counters on things without tapping. Just get those fate counters out and then just tap to do the stuff. At any rate, I'll just put a lot of abilities to untap creatures in this deck.
Yeah, and that's definitely a wizard theme no matter what colors you're using.
Those are some of the challenges I had to deal with. But let's hear what your deck does.
Okay, so overall, we're going to go with what wizards do, which is a lot of tapping and untapping, a lot of wizards in blue specifically. First of all, I got to say, this is almost a mono blue deck. There are so many wizards. You had the problem finding wizards. I had too many wizards. I had something like 60 wizards at one point, and I was just cutting them all over the place.
Jealous.
And I noticed there's a lot of themes, obviously, when you have a really heavy tribal deck like this. So they all want to tap to do their activated abilities. A lot of them have activated abilities that deal damage. Prodigal Sorcerer is a classic one, obviously. Deals 1 damage when you tap it. A lot of them draw you cards. And there are quite a few that will also tap to, like, Force Spike, which is a card that's counter target spell unless the owner pays 1 colorless.
Right.
So I can tap a guy, make your spell cost 1 more, basically. So with the tapping and untapping, you can see there's some synergy there.
Yeah.
And then finally with Derevi specifically as the commander, she wants things to be unblockable in order to tap and untap things. So we've got a little bit of that theme running through it as well.
Because you want to hit the other person for
Gotta
combat
hit.
damage. Yeah.
That's how you're going to hit your combat damage, and then that's how you're going to untap and take advantage of these activated abilities. So what does your deck specifically want to do based around this?
Definitely. So Triad of Fates, I want to be able to untap stuff. I got a couple of cards in there that do that. 1,000-Year Elixir, great artifact that for 1 you can untap target creature. And you can also do activated abilities as though they have haste. So you could just cast your commander and then just right away put a fate counter on something, untap it, do it again. Just get it 1 activation right away. Magerite Stone, just a great artifact. 1 and tap, untap target creature that has an activated ability with tap in the costs. So you got a few of those. This is going to be great. One card that I think is extra useful that I snuck in is Village Bellringer. It's a human scout with flash. It's 1/4 for 3 mana, white and 2. And when it enters the battlefield, you untap all the creatures you control. I've got other creatures that tap for benefit as well. So this guy untaps the whole team so I can do it all over again. I'm also going to need some guys to make tokens. One good one for this. Evangel of Heliod. It's a human cleric, sort of a wizard, that when he enters the battlefield, you put a number of 1/1 white soldiers equal to your devotion to white. So that's the enter the battlefield ability. I was looking for a few creatures that did that. And I've also got Twilight Drover. Whenever a creature token leaves play, it doesn't say dies or exiles, so in this case, Triad of Fates is going to exile, so Twilight Drover will take advantage of this.
Wow.
Yeah. Whenever a token leaves play, put a +1/+1 counter on Twilight Drover, 3 mana, remove a +1/+1 counter, and you can make 2 more white spirit tokens. I can do a lot with these little tokens. There's a lot going on in this deck. So
Twilight Drover. This is a card that, man, it works in any token deck. Obviously with white, it's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good.
And another thing that this deck is going to do, that just white and black naturally want to sacrifice for advantage, so I have a lot of abilities to sacrifice creatures to get advantage from that, and Twilight Drover is huge when that's going on.
Those are the things that your deck's doing. What do I got going on over here? Like I mentioned, I've got tappers and untappers as well. This is like the most things in common our 2 decks will have, and I think we split it up pretty hard after this. Yours are largely artifact-based, as you mentioned. My tappers and untappers are creature-based ones. Obviously, the best one is probably the commander. The only thing is you'll need to take advantage of them at instant speed, all the activated abilities there, because they all have to happen during combat. So everything when it'll hit, you'll be able to tap or untap certain ones. Before the ones that ping and so on and so forth, that's fine. The counter ones, that doesn't help us. For those, we'll use things like Kiora's Follower, which of course is 1 green, 1 blue, and you just tap to untap another target permanent. Unfortunately, this is not a wizard, but it's so good that I had to include it. I like it a lot. There are some actual wizards that do it. For example, Fate Stitcher is one of the best ones that does it, and he is 3 and a blue for a zombie wizard. He's a 1/2, and you can just tap him, and you may tap or untap another target permanent. So this one can do anything. This one can do a land. This one can do your artifacts. It also has the wicked bonus of having Unearth for 1 blue. If he's in your graveyard somehow and you need to bring him back to give something a quick untap, you can do that.
Don't forget about that, as I always do.
There's a couple other wizards that do this. A Fetto Grifter is a really great one. It's just untap a creature or an artifact. And there's a couple other guys that do this. While these are small dudes, and it seems like this bonus that we're getting is pretty small, the untap, you'll see later how broken it can be. And the fact that it itself as a wizard is also really going to play in here.
Andy and I faced our decks off against each other, and I'm glad to hear that Derevi is banned 1v1 because it was a nightmare to play 1v1.
Yeah, it totally is. And like I think they banned it mostly because of the put it into play from the command zone. I could be wrong about that, but I just assume that's why. But the tapping and untapping is also just mental. Not banned in multiplayer though, so please go ahead, play your Derevi decks in multiplayer.
Please.
So those are our tappers and our untappers. I didn't even include the artifacts. Because in this, we want wizards, and we want the creatures that are going to be able to become unblockable. So the artifacts aren't quite as good here. I did have the one that gives the haste, though.
1,000-year elixir.
1,000-year elixir I do have in here.
It's haste for the ability.
It's haste for the abilities only, exactly. And you can pay one and untap it.
And so since I'm going to be doing a lot of sacrificing, it's a bit of a non-bow, if you will, because Triad of Fates does exile to draw those cards.
Yeah, that sucks.
The natural sack engines going on in white and black anyway, so of course I've got Skursdag High Priest, the guy with the Morbid trigger. You can tap him to get a 5/5 flying black demon. That's one way we're going to win, is by getting a lot of 5/5 black demons out there.
He's great.
Dictate of Erebos, cheap Grave Pact. For 1 more mana, you can flash it in, so whenever a creature I control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Again, I'm going to be sacking guys all over the place, so you're going to be sacrificing your whole team, I hope. And then Faith's Reward. It's a 4-mana instant that returns to the battlefield all permanent cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. This is great wrath protection if someone just throws all your stuff in the graveyard. Sure. And this is also great if you intend to just sacrifice your whole team, pay that 4 mana, everyone comes back, you can sacrifice them all over again if you just want to do like a massive sacrifice event, which I will get to in a moment. We have a couple of reasons where we might want to do this.
We will get to the massive sacrifice event for sure. That's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next category was things that affect all wizards. And there are specifically 2 absolutely bonkers cards that affect all wizards and essentially also give them haste with this ability. You'll see. Okay, here it is. The first one is Patron Wizard. I didn't really know about this card until I built a Derevi deck, and I found this, and I immediately got it. It's one of the more expensive cards in this deck. TCG mid is $590 right now. You can get it for $470 for the low. But it's 3 blue. This is largely a mono blue deck, so it's difficult to cast. But it's 3 blue. He's a 2/2. He's just a wizard. He's a handsome old man. I'll tell you that much. The art on him is just what a dapper dude.
Oh, yeah. Silver Fox.
He has the ability, tap an untapped wizard you control, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 colorless. So
your whole team can do this.
Your whole team will counter spells, essentially, as long as they're up. And the great thing about Derevi is you'll swing with a bunch of your creatures. Some of them will be unblockables. Hopefully we have something that makes them have flying, which, again, I'll hit later. But then you can untap all of your guys again, give them like pseudo-vigilance, and now it's your turn, and I've got 6 wizards up. I can use them to counter your spells. So
make me pay 6 more for any spell.
And the thing that I discovered today, I played on Forge a little bit today just to get more of a feel for this deck. So you go to play a cheap card. Let's say you're at 7 mana, and you go to play a 3 mana spell. I go, okay, I'll tap 1 wizard. Will you pay the 1?
No.
You go, yeah, okay, I'll pay it. And then I go, okay, you paid the 1.
Oh, no.
Now I'll tap another one. Will you pay it? And you go, oh, is this worth it now?
Does it really work that way?
Yes, that is how it works. Yeah.
That's the meanest.
While it's on the stack, you can keep doing it one at a time. You don't have to do them all at once, which is what I thought originally, right? But no, because it's a different ability. So
man.
It's brutal because you might be thinking, okay, I'll play this 1 spell. I've got 4 more mana left. He has to tap 4 wizards to do this. He's not going to be able to do this again after.
Sure.
But if I do it 1 by 1 like that, you've got to decide, is it worth it for you to use all your mana to play this 3 mana spell? Or is it like, well, no, I'll stop now and try and cast another one? But you can't do that. You got to write it out. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I feel like
the only way to beat that is that the guy to your left is the guy who tries to make you use them to counterspell, so the rest of us at the table can freely do things to you.
Yes. That's going to be a way. Like, someone's got to sacrifice, but who wants to be that person, right?
No way.
So I think largely what this does and what we found in our game was that you just kind of keep things in your hand.
Yeah, I didn't realize that 1 mana trick, but I would just cast medium-sized things and hope they squeaked through. A lot of this deck that I'm built has a lot of onboard tricks it can do, like sack outlets and things that happen when creatures die, so I could do things without actually casting spells, but that's only because I got there at that point. I mean,
that's the thing. That is one way around this for sure, is if you've got some things on the board already with some activated abilities, and that's where you can sink your mana into, hopefully you'll be able to handle the Patron Wizard and his buddies that way. Otherwise, it's very hard, especially in a smaller game. I think once you get into like a 5-player game, it's not going to be quite as bad. You'll have to save them up to use on really big spells, but
the worst part is
oppressive.
That if he lands on the table after 5 other wizards, those guys don't have summoning sickness, so they can still tap.
Here's the crazy part. Because of the way the wording is on the card, you can tap things that have summoning sickness with them. So you can play them on turn 3, drop 2 wizards next turn, you play something, I can tap those ones that have summoning sickness because
tapping is the cost of that.
Exactly. Tap an untapped wizard you control is the cost that Patron Wizard has on him. So he can even tap himself when he has summoning sickness. It's insane. And it's very, very similar to this card. We have Azami, Lady of Scrolls, which is 2 and 3 blue. So it's very similar. It's an 0/2. She's a legendary creature, human wizard. She has tap an untapped wizard you control, draw a card. So it's the exact same thing. So if I ever had these 2 cards out, and I believe I did in our game, it's like, okay, do you want to play any spells? You're like, no, you're going to counter them. Okay, then on your end step, I'll draw 6 cards. And it's the exact same thing. The wording's messed up, so you can do it to things that have summoning sickness. It's absolutely bonkers. When I searched for like Wizards Tribal just to get like sort of an idea of some of the cards to use after I'd built my deck, Azami is a popular commander for Wizard Tribal, which makes sense.
Makes total sense.
She's great. She's super cheap. They reprinted her in the 2013 Commander set. Also, finally, affecting all wizards, we have a really great card, Sage of Fables. It's a 2 and a blue, Merfolk Wizard. It's a 2/2, and it has each other wizard you control comes into play with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then it has 2 colorless, remove a 1/1 counter from a creature you control, draw a card. This is really helpful. It doesn't sound like it's doing a lot, especially since when you look at this list, you're going to see a lot of 1/2s and 2/2s. The wizards are very small, even the unblockable ones, especially the unblockable ones. But this is going to make those unblockable wizards have a little bit more of a punch. It actually adds up fairly quickly. A little extra card draw if you need it.
A little extra card draw.
A little, just a little bit.
Like 5 per turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds brutal. So we talked about just massive sacrificing events for this deck, using things like Faith's Reward to loop that over twice. 2 ways this deck can win. I run a card called Exsanguinate. For those of you who don't know, black, X. Each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. And of course, I run Ashnod's Altar, right, which is that artifact where you can sacrifice a creature to get 2 colorless mana.
Got it, yeah.
So, it's not uncommon for me to have like 4 or 5 tokens, 4 or 5 creatures, sack all of those. Now, the tokens won't come back from something like Faith's Reward because tokens disappear once they change zones, but all those creatures will come back, and some of them have ETB token generation anyway, so they'll just make more tokens, and then they'll all sack them all. So it's not difficult to get an Exsanguinate for a good 15 to 20. So as long as people are dead, getting down near 0, you'll be plenty of life. And then there's a black-white version called Debt to the Deathless. X, white, black. Each opponent loses 2 times X life, and you gain life equal. So it's a little bit harder to start, but in a commander game, having a lot of mana is not that difficult. So by the time it makes a difference, you're going to drain them for way more this way.
That's a card that I remember when it came out. It's in Dragon's Maze, right? I think.
Yes, it is.
I remember being like, this is not a very good card in Limited.
No.
And sort of writing it off, as early Magic players probably do, when they learn how to evaluate cards in Limited and then move to a different format like Commander.
Sure.
And then I saw someone buying it in the store for their Commander deck, and I was like, that card's no good, buddy. But then I also heard them talking about it, and I was like, wait a second. That card's crazy. If you get it off with anything like that, it's so good. And even though it's only one-time use and you want to get more use out of a card than one, it's such a big effect.
This card can win a game on its own because each opponent loses 2 times X. So if you got 10 mana available,
that's where it is. That's where it comes in.
If you got 10 mana available, the first 4 is to cast it, and then the 6 X is doubled to 12. Like, you're doing 12 to everybody. If it's a 4-player game, you're gaining 36 life off of it. Like, that's a huge swing.
Huge swing.
That's what I'm going to do when I sacrifice stuff.
The other thing that I have is make them unblockable, make them fly. Do either of those 2 things. There's a couple wizards that have unblockable on them naturally, which is perfect. I thought about including a couple just unblockable creatures, which is what I have in my normal Derevi deck that isn't wizard-based. But I decided that in this, I'll stick to the wizard, so we don't have quite as large an unblockable sort of package in this. But there's about 4 or 5. There's one wizard that has shadow. There's one that's just unblockable. There's one that is unblockable, and you can sack it to give another creature unblockable. Nurok Invisimancer is a really good one. It's 1 and 2 blue, and it when it enters the battlefield, something else is unblockable, and it has unblockable as well. And I think it's like a 1/2 or something. But the ones that I wanted to highlight specifically for this section are 2 cards. First of them is Wonder, which is just a classic card. It's 3 and a blue. It's a 2/2, and it has flying. But it says if Wonder's in your graveyard and you control an island, all of your creatures have flying. So you just put this guy out and use him as a chump blocker, basically. And when he's in your graveyard, all of your dudes will have flying. So that's going to be way easier to get through for Derevi's ability. The second creature, which I had a real eureka moment when I found it.
Oh, I love these.
Was Archetype of Imagination. And it's 6 mana, 3/2 from Born of the Gods, and it's an enchantment creature. It's a human wizard. Even if this creature wasn't a wizard, it would be so good for this deck. But the fact that it's a wizard just is so sick.
Yeah, they're just throwing you wizards all over the place.
It's unreal that this creature is a wizard because it has creatures you control have flying, and creatures your opponents control lose flying and can't have or gain flying. It says, and you kind of have to look through this text to find all of your creatures are unblockable.
Yeah. Oh, what about Reach?
Reach, of course, is
Reach is the get
loophole,
around,
right?
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, but I don't see a ton of Reach.
Certainly not in our meta.
In our meta, and of course there's going to be some here and there, but most people will just play flyers to stop, or play things like Wonder to give their creatures flying. This stops that cold. So basically, your wizards will have pseudo unblockable, and that is so incredible for this deck. It allows you to have pseudo vigilance. It allows you to tap and untap the specific guys that you want to.
The black one is not a wizard. The black one is a Gorgon.
Yeah, so I was like, maybe it's a wizard too.
No. The black one is not a wizard. It is a Gorgon. Maybe the least used tribal.
Yeah.
So and it's the same thing, except instead of flying, this deals with Death Touch. So creatures I control have Death Touch. Creatures opponents control lose Death Touch and can't have or gain Death Touch. Another category of cards that I wanted to include are just, I guess I call them peacemakers. Things to keep people off my back for a while. Because as I said, I want to build up to that massive sacrifice and just for huge advantage to either have Dictative Verbose for you to lose your whole board or maybe just a massive Exsanguinate. And I have a few other Death Touchers in there. I think Stinkweed Imp is a great wall. He's a flying 1/2 for 3. With Death Touch, although it's old Death Touch, so it's not worded as such, but it is essentially Death Touch.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And he has Dredge 5, so if he ever dies, I can just mill myself for 5. Well, I can Dredge 5, technically, and just have him on the next time I draw a card and just have him right back on the battlefield to keep protecting me.
He's such a good creature in Commander. I feel like it's like a lot of graveyard decks know about him and use him, but I think he's even good in any black deck, really, if you're looking to go long game. And
he's such a great wall. Unless your guy has First Strike, he's going to stop anything and kill it in return, and he'll just come back. And they've got a couple other creatures that can grant Death Touch, and just Death Touch sort of as a bit of a mini theme.
The funny thing is if you have the Archetype of Finality and Stinkweed Imp, he'll have Death Touch and that ability that he has.
Right.
So he'll have actual Death Touch and then this other.
Sure. And then one card that I had to put in, it's an artifact called Thornbite Staff. It costs 4 to equip, or you can equip it to a shaman automatically when they enter the battlefield. But, I have 1 or 2 shamans as an accident.
Yeah.
But it gives the equipped creature an ability to tap for 2 and do 1 damage to any creature or player. But the key, I think, of Thornbite Staff is that anytime a creature dies, you untap that creature. So if you get this on any Death Toucher, of which I have plenty, it basically becomes 2 mana, kill anything, over and over, because whoever you do that 1 point to will be Death Touch damage. Your guy will untap because they will die, and you can do it to the next person, the next person, the next person.
This is such a good card.
It's such a good
How
card.
much is this one?
It is, the median right now is 73 cents.
It's so crazy because it combos with a lot of other really good cards, right?
Sure, it combos with that too.
Like you said, any Death Toucher, it just becomes a machine gun.
Another card that I put in, and maybe this is a bit of a going deep on just wishful thinking here, but it comes up once in a while. Soldevi Adonate. I've never heard of this.
I'd never heard of this card either. Yeah.
Sure, it's a small cleric. It's because I went deep on clerics. I couldn't find wizards. I was looking for other clerics.
You're just half tribal wizard, half tribal clerics.
I'm sorry, guys. I couldn't do it. I couldn't give you a good, solid wizard tribal that I could feel happy about. I wouldn't want to play it, but this one's fun. Trust me.
You did use almost every wizard you could in your colors, though.
Yeah,
we must mention that.
Yeah. Soldevi Adonate has an ability, tap, sacrifice a black or artifact creature to add an amount of black mana equal to that creature's casting cost to your mana pool. And if you have Thornbite Staff on her, every time you sack one of your own guys to get extra mana, she'll untap and you can do it over and over and over and just get massive amounts of mana because, as I said, massive sacrifice events. That's what this deck is about.
Massive sacrifice events. All right, finally in my category, I have the things that you actually want to tap and abuse and untap. And this is where the other colors come in for me a little bit. This is where we're finally going to use a couple of green cards because we really have not used any of them.
Yeah, if you don't remember, there is green in your commander's
There's green
identity.
and white in here, and we really don't use it. I mean, like, if you look at this deck list, we'll post it on Tapped Out. There are some white cards. There are some green cards. You know, we got some artifact destruction. We got some classic things you need in Commander, of course. But really, we're highlighting the Wizards here. This is Wizards Tribal.
Yeah, and we're going to highlight the meat and potatoes of the deck.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to know that we got a bit of ramp in here.
You don't need to know if I'm running Cultivate, or Soul Ring. Like,
Right.
Yes, I am, okay? But one of the craziest cards, and I discovered this when I bought the Derevi Precon, is this card called Spawning Grounds, and it's a big one. It's 6 and 2 green, so it's 8 for an aura that enchants a land, which is very interesting. What the land then gets is Enchanted Land has tap, put a 5/5 green beast creature token with trample onto the battlefield. All this needs to have to go off is you to be able to cast this card and for it to resolve. Once you enchant a land with this thing and you swing with, again, a couple of your flyers, let's say you hit with 3 guys. That's 3 tap or untap triggers. You're going to be able to get 4 5/5 beasts with trample out of this.
Whoa.
The turn you cast it, because it's on a land, which of course won't have summoning sickness. Even if you played it on a land that was already tapped, you'll get 3 or 4 or whatever. Anyways, you get 1 less than what I just said. This is your reward for going late in the game. You'll get a bunch of beasts, and then it's like, how are you going to deal with 20 5/5 beasts with trample coming at you? Oh, we are also running Kazandu Tuskcaller, who will tap to make 3/3 elephants once we level them up. The other sort of more wizard-themed things that we're going to tap are little pingers. Classic Tim, Prodigal Sorcerer, 2 and a blue for a 1/1 that just taps and deals 1 damage to creature or player. This is also creature removal, I found. Especially, of course, smaller things in the early game. You can get a little larger in the later game. Once you got more creatures out, dealing more damage with Derevi, and just having your other tappers and untappers, of course. Primarily, there's one Tim-style pinger that I found that is really broken, and his name is Revica Wizard Savant. He's from Homelands. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Going way back. I wasn't around for it, but Revica Wizard Savant is 2 and 2 blue for a legendary creature dwarf wizard. So if you're looking to build that dwarf deck, this guy will slide right into that as well. He's an 0/1. It really sucks because he can't swing, but we don't want to swing at this guy anyways, because you tap Revica, he deals 2 damage to target creature or player.
Whoa.
And doesn't untap during your next untap step, which we do not care about if he untaps or not.
We do not
We
care.
can untap him very easily. So you can very, very easily in this deck, and I did it several times, deal 10 to 16 damage with this guy in 1 turn. Obviously not the turn you cast him, he'll have summoning sickness. If you let this guy live, you're in trouble. Opponents. So hear that.
Well, what about Mr. Counter every spell? You're in trouble if you let him live, too.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things in your deck that you're in trouble if you let live.
And those are really the main things, too. This is one that's not in this deck, but I use it in my normal Derevi deck. I have to mention it's called Storm Spirit, and it's 3 in Bant, and it does the same thing as Revica. He taps to deal 2 damage, but only to a creature. But it's still crazy. Creature removal. It's great. So this is getting away from the main theme of our damage-based or token creators. Another one is called Beguiler of Wills. 3 and 2 blue, creature, human wizard. She's only a 1/1, so a 1/1 for 5, not great. But she has tap, gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of creatures you control. The majority of this deck lives at 2 and 3 mana. By the time you get up turn 6, turn 7, you probably have 4, maybe even 5 creatures out. You drop Beguiler of Wills, next turn you're going to be able to take something that's 6. And you can do it 3 or 4 or 5 times. She alone becomes a huge blowout. You just take everyone's 6-drop. That's game a lot of the time, I feel like. The time it happened to me, it was, yeah.
Your deck's doing super powerful things, and my deck wants to hide and have you not attack me much.
My deck definitely wants to be the problem.
So I have the Death Touch to dissuade you from attacking, and if that wasn't enough, there's an enchantment called Aurification. It's an older one. It's an enchantment that says whenever a creature deals damage to you, put a gold counter on it, and each creature with a gold counter on it is a wall and can't attack. And then when Aurification leaves play, all those gold counters disappear. So they can get those guys back. They can unwall them.
I don't think you ever got this out against me when the couple of times we played these two decks together.
I did not.
But if you did, that just shuts this deck down really hard.
Big time.
I need to be able to do that combat damage and to untap my guys.
She makes another great commander, but Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts. She costs 7 to make, but whenever a creature deals damage to me, destroy that creature and put a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying out of the battlefield. So, you're not going to want to attack me because you will die.
Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts. Someone super smart must have suggested that to you.
Yes, that was you, Andy. Andy suggested the Teysa team. She's not a human or a cleric or a shaman, but she's an advisor.
Or a wizard.
No, or a wizard. You know there's no extra wizards in here. But she also makes spirit tokens, which I can use to sack for other reasons, put those fate counters on, get cards out of them. She teams up great with little Teysa. You can sacrifice or exile.
You sack 3 white creatures.
Sack
right?
3 white creatures to exile a target creature. But whenever a black creature you have dies, you get a little spirit.
Yeah.
So it's just fuel for it. I have a lot of sack for benefit creatures. For example, Zathrid Necromancer. Whenever he or a human dies, I get a 2/2 zombie, so I'm going to be sacking humans to get some zombies. I've got Pawn of Ulamog. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you get a little Eldrazi spawn. That's a token to exile or just use for more mana.
I like seeing people build decks, and you can see their influence, sets that have influenced them. I've found, and I mean, this is only episode 2 of us, but I've known you for a long time and seen you build decks and stuff. I see you using the Eldrazi spawn tokens so often.
Oh, man,
and
free mana.
This is just a total side note. Sean has a cube that's awesome, super fun. We play it all the time, and it's very heavily influenced by the Zendikar block, I think, and the spawn tokens are a huge part of it, and they're great and they're so fun. And this is the second deck now where you have. First one was all about those little guys, and this one you're still finding ways to fit them in. And I love
use
it.
them. And Grim Haruspex, right? Who is actually a wizard? Thank you.
Yes, this is one of the key wizards in this deck.
Yeah. It's a 3/2 for 3 that whenever a non-token creature dies that you control, draw a card. It's great card draw. You're going to be sacking creatures, drawing cards, bringing them back.
Although there are not a ton of wizards in here, you did really build the deck around the wizard's abilities.
Yes.
You've got Grim Haruspex. You've got Giza.
Giza is in here. Giza is a wizard. Yes.
So Ghoulcaller Giza is a wizard. Also another sack. So you're working with those sack engines, and you're working with the creatures that benefit from sack, and it comes from the wizards.
It's true. Endrick Sar, Master Breeder, he's that legendary human wizard that whenever you cast a creature spell, put X Black Thrall token creatures, where X is the spell's converted mana cost. And if there's ever 7, you sacrifice him. But I've got some sack outlets, so there should never be more than 7 on the battlefield.
Right. I just love that. On the surface, you might look like, oh, Sean kind of ignored the wizards thing, and you just made a token sacrifice deck. What the hell? No, you fully stuck to what the wizards were telling you in this. And,
yes.
And it's great.
Thank you. That makes me feel better. Although there are not great many wizards by numbers, they are the cornerstones of this deck.
They are the leaders of this deck. No question about it.
I think most of them are legendary anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
That covers the meat and potatoes of this deck. That's all the angles that this thing wants to run.
Okay, so now let's go to, and we've probably covered a couple of these, but I just wanted to talk about what were some surprises and some cards you might consider as overachieving in the environment that your deck created. I'll say Basalt Monolith. Absolutely mental with Derevi and with the untapping and untapping. Basalt Monolith, of course, it's cost 3 colorless. You tap it for 3 colorless, but then you got to pay 3 to untap it. Well, this way you don't have to do it. So you're just creating loads and loads of colorless mana.
I'm going to put you on the spot right now.
Sure.
Can I ask how many X spells you have in there to take advantage of possible near infinite mana?
I don't have any X spells.
Oh, man.
Because this is a wizard deck. Although you're right that they would be able to do this. That is definitely one road I could have taken. I really just included the Monolith just for a simple, we can ramp out a couple more wizards with this.
Fair enough.
But that's definitely a way you could take it if you want to focus it on the untapping on a mana level, on a ramp level. I more focus it on doing the things the creatures were doing.
Sure, fair enough. One card that I think was a super useful for this deck, very happy to have discovered this one. It's called Reconnaissance. They had to change the Oracle text because of the way it was worded, but basically it's a 1 white enchantment, and for the cost of 0, you basically untap a creature you control and remove it from combat. It has to be an attacking creature you control. So what this means is you can attack with your whole team, and then anybody who looks like they might die from combat, pre or post combat trick, you can just pay 0 and untap them and bring them out of combat.
You kind of Maze of Ith yourself.
Only if you're attacking, but you can do that during that secret end combat step, which is after damage. So they can still do the damage, and while it still counts as attacking, you can untap them. So it gives your whole team vigilance, and then you get to take advantage of that recent mechanic.
I should have put this card in. What am I thinking?
Yeah, you should. You can get inspired. So the inspired trigger.
We should have talked about inspired. We're both using creatures that have inspired.
I got a couple keys in here. King Makar the Gold Cursed.
Oof.
He's that guy where whenever he untaps his inspired triggers, you get to exile a creature, and you get a gold token that you can sacrifice for one of any color of mana. So it's not a creature token, it's a little artifact token, but it's ramp. So there's a controversy because I think he's supposed to be King Midas. It's a May ability. I think a lot of people were a little upset that if there are no enemy creatures, he doesn't have to turn himself into gold.
I disagree with everyone who says that.
Okay.
I totally disagree with everyone who says that because that's assuming that King Midas couldn't have touched himself.
Okay, well, if not himself, then certainly his own team.
Okay, maybe his own team, but like he should never have to turn himself into gold. And I think that if you're going to word this on a Magic card, then you have to make it May.
Or you say
or another
target
creature.
Another creature.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Anyway, you know what? It works for us though. It's in our favor, so let's take it.
Sure.
Another inspired guy is just Pain Seer. Whenever he untaps, it's a little Dark Confidant.
Yep.
You just look at the top card and you lose the life equal to its casting cost, and you put it in your hand.
And one thing that I think both of our decks have in common is that both these decks run at a pretty low mana cost. Like our curve is fairly low.
Yeah, I have a ton at 3. I mean, I'm not going to go into it, but I'm running a couple cards that can pull things out of the graveyard at 3 or less cost, so I want to keep things pretty cheap.
I have an overachiever that sort of reminds me of what we talked about with Debt to the Deathless.
Yep.
Is a card called Hidden Strings. It's another Dragon's Maze card. Look through those Dragon Maze. Look through those bulk Dragon Mazes you got, because there might be 1 or 2 little gems that are good in only very specific decks. The Hidden Strings is 1 in a blue. It's a sorcery. It says you may tap or untap target permanent. Then you may tap or untap another target permanent. It also has Cipher, so you can encode it onto a creature, and then whenever that creature deals combat damage, you can cast Hidden Strings again for free. Now, I remember when this card came out, and I remember listening to Limited Resources, which is a podcast that we love, and
great
Sean,
podcast.
You got me into it. The guys who host were very baffled about Hidden Strings. They couldn't really figure out why this card would be made, and of course in Limited it was not very good. This is a card that sort of gives something vigilance, and maybe you can untap a land also. It's like
a little bit of ramp,
yeah, like what is that? That's no good. But you got to pay 2 originally to do it, so like anyways. In this deck, of course, because we want to untap and tap our broken wizards, this is insane. So you just need your 1 unblockable creature. If you have your commander out, now all of a sudden that creature will tap or untap 3 things or do 1 thing 3 times. It's honestly super worth it. The turn it comes in, you get to tap and untap guys 4 times alone. That can give you 4 5/5 beasts with trample if you have your spawning grounds going. It can give you 4 3/3 elephants if you have Kazandu Tuskcaller going. So this card is very much worth it in this. You just might not have even known it existed because it's such an ignorable card from that set.
Good call. One that I think is like an all-star for this deck. It just hits on so many angles that this deck wants to do is Ophiomancer. It's a shaman. It's unfortunately not a wizard. But it was from a commander set. I'm not familiar with it. I guess I must have missed the precon that this came in, but it's...
it's from the Jund one, the Prosh.
It's from Prosh. I've seen a lot of people play Prosh. This card comes up. It's a 2/2 human shaman. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, and I'll have you know there are no other snakes in this deck. So.
This is not also snake tribal?
No, it's not.
Very secretly, no?
If you control no snakes, put a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch onto the battlefield. So it's got that Death Touch angle that this deck wants. It makes a token creature, so I can exile it to the commander to draw some cards if I can put a fate counter on it. Or I can just exile it every turn to one of my sack outlets for benefit. Because at the beginning of each upkeep, I get a new one.
You get a new 1/1 snake.
A new 1/1 snake with Death Touch. So, if I'm not going to use it on my turn, I'll just sack it before your upkeep and get a new one to replace it.
We do have to mention, though, that in order to do that, you have to be able to tap your Triad of Fates, give it a fate counter.
Sure.
Untap the Triad of Fates, and then do it, right? So it's quite a setup for you to be able to do this.
Right. If I have multiple artifacts that will untap, I can do that. I'm just talking for one of my other sack outlets, like Viscera Seer, for example.
Yeah, right. Viscera Seer will do it and give you a scry. The last 2 that I have that were sort of overachievers / surprises. Actually, one of them I already mentioned. I mentioned the Archetype of Imagination already. So I'll just talk about this one. Daring Thief We talked about Inspired being an excellent thing. And I didn't want to have very many non-wizards in here. As we said, I had to fight to get the number down below 60.
Yeah, we heard, yeah.
Yeah, but this is one that, again, I had in my Derevi deck, the one I actually have, and it just is such an overproducer. It's so good. Daring Thief is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human rogue. Unfortunately, he did not learn the ways of the Magi.
Sure, he decided to go rogue class instead of wizard class.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He has Inspired. Whenever Daring Thief becomes untapped, you may exchange control of target non-land permanent you control and target permanent an opponent controls that shares a card type with it. So what I found is, you might be like, well, why do you want to trade off your guys? You don't want to trade off your wizards, right? You don't want to trade off these things. You've got quite a insular thing going on here. Well, actually, it's really great to trade off your small wizards, because your wizards are 1/1s and 1/2s, and they might tap for 1 damage and all this kind of stuff, which is amazing for you, but total garbage for your opponents usually. I had a game where I traded Wonder to one of my opponents. I gave them the Wonder that I had, and I took their huge demon that they had out. So it's like, yeah, sure, I'll trade that Wonder. Now, what are you going to do, block with it? Great. Give everything I have flying. No problem. So Daring Thief will sort of sometimes mess a little bit with your combo package you have going on with these wizards, but the payoff is usually huge because you're going to be trading for such value. I'm going to take your Ulamog,
Sure.
I'm going to take the biggest, baddest thing you have out. The crazy thing also with this is that, like, if you have an enchantment or if you have a mana rock, you can trade it for another really great enchantment. You can trade it for another great artifact. You can't do lands. This thing will basically get you the best of whatever version you're willing to trade away.
Yeah, that sounds like you get a lot of nice surprises.
And you can do it 3 or 4 times in a turn. Again, like, you can just totally swap boards if someone's really outgunning you. You can do that the turn he comes in because it's just tapping and untapping triggers from Derevi. So.
What I like about that card is that you never know when you sit down to play a game of Commander what kind of things you'll be facing. That's what I love about the format.
Yeah.
And your deck's built to be a nice machine. It all works within itself. But if someone comes along and just has a nice machine that's just running a little smoother, you can just take the necessary parts out of that to just make it collapse in on itself, or just use its weapons against him.
Yeah. This is one that might not look like it's quite as good as you think because you're trading your own stuff, but I've won games of this. It's so good in this deck.
Yeah.
It's insane.
That's all I want to talk about. I just want to give one tiny honorable mention to Merciless Eviction. I didn't know about this card. Again, it's Dragon's Maze, little surprise.
Yep.
It's a 6-mana Wrath. You just choose one. You exile all artifacts or creatures or enchantments or planeswalkers. Usually you'll be using creatures, but it's great that it exiles everything. They're not going to be getting them back out of their graveyard shenanigans. And for 50 cents, no problem.
No
it's a
problem.
steal.
Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Actually, 2 more things to say. Quickly.
Okay.
Very quickly, though, because they're in the must-have section, which is very similar to the overachievers section, I think. But these ones, I found, because I'm going tribal, Obelisk of Erd was an excellent card. You really want it because your little guys are getting through for damage, but they're usually only hitting for very small amounts. Obelisk of Erd, you pick wizards, you convoke it out. All your wizards are now +2/+2. So now it makes those unblockable wizards an actual end game threat.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really good. And then I've also got Pemin's Aura / Freed from the Real. Pemin's Aura is 1 and 2 blue, and it's an aura that basically turns whatever creature it's on into Aetherling. It has 4 abilities on it. One's you can pay blue to untap it. One you can pay blue to give it flying. The other one's pay blue to give it shroud. And one is play colorless to give it the classic blue pump, which is +1/-1 or -1/+1. So you can give your guy flying, someone tries to remove it, give it shroud, swing with it, pump it for 1 million.
Great.
Although really what you're doing with this is untapping it. So this does everything this deck wants to do. And Freed from the Real is very similar. 2 and a blue for an enchantment, and it has blue tapped enchanted creature or blue untapped. If you just have one of the counter guys, you put Freed from the Real on them, and all of a sudden all your opponent's spells cost 5 more.
Brutal.
Just from this one card.
Is there any cards that you're not sure about in the current build?
Yeah, I've got 2. I'll say them real quick. One's called Awakening. I sort of read the card wrong. So it's kind of my own fault. It still does what I thought. It just does more, and I'll explain it. Yeah, it does more in a bad way, though. Awakening is a green enchantment for 2 and 2 green, and it says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, untap all creatures and lands. So basically, what this does is it's a Prophet of Kruphix, which of course is included in this deck because it is a wizard. I didn't mention it because it's just so broken. If you're playing blue-green, you know it's in a deck. It does have the added synergy of being a wizard, though. But Awakening does it to everyone. And in the game that I had, I thought, oh, it does it to everyone? Wow. Okay, well, I'll probably get more of the advantage off of this, so it's fine. I think my opponent was playing like Varel of the Hullclade, So he was just untapping all of his lands and doubling up all the counters on everything that he had, basically, and he just very quickly ran over me because I played Awakening. So while I know that it's usually fine to play a card like this when you think you're going to get more of an advantage out of it, although I think Awakening has big opportunity for you to not get the most advantage of it, and for someone else to maybe that's all they needed for this one turn to now activate some ability a million times and kill you with it. So, and my other one was Order of White Clay, which I know you have
I do.
in there also, and I think it's good.
I wasn't familiar with them before we built this deck. For 3 mana.
1 and 2 white.
And an untap trigger.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing. So you have to get him tapped somehow, and then you can untap him with this mana payment, and you can put something back from the graveyard that costs 3 or less. Basically, this is the Sun Titan ability on a smaller guy.
Yeah, he's a 1/4, and for 1 and 2 white, and untap him, you get that ability. I think it's good, but I think in a deck where you're trying to cram as many wizards in, and I don't know how important like each individual wizard is. Outside of maybe like Patron Wizard and Azami, I don't know if there's any I'm like dying to get back from the graveyard.
Well, I'm putting him in because I might sacrifice the guy I want back.
It makes total sense for you to have him. Way more sense for you to have him. I think he's still quite good.
Yeah, he's actually technically the most expensive card in the deck that I built.
It's another reason why I'm thinking about, is he worth the cost, basically?
Yeah, I mean, we're all about building budget decks.
For other people, he's what, like $3?
He's $3. He's $3. Yes.
Is he worth the cost? I don't know. That's how budget we get.
Yeah. Cards I'm not sure about. I'm running Sanguine Bond, which is that enchantment that whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, which effectively doubles your exsanguinates and your debt to the deathless. And I do have a lot of ancillary life gain. Like I have a little bit of Extort going on. I have Blood Artist in here. I've got a couple of lifelink creatures. But sometimes it doesn't do anything. But when it does do something, it does something amazing.
We talked about this. To me, it looked like, I think I suggested you were going to add Tezas. This is one I thought maybe you should cut that because you do have some life gain, but it doesn't seem like it's enough to reliably hit as you have Exsanguinate out.
Another one that I think I might swap out Wizard for Wizard is I have Magus of the Abyss, which is to say that at the beginning of each upkeep, destroy target non-artifact creature that player controls of his or her choice. So basically, you got to pick one of your creatures and destroy it. I've got a ton of token creatures, so I'm figuring that won't be a problem for me. It'll probably be worse for you. But I think I may swap it out for Magus of the Moat, which is his cousin. They made a lot of Maguses, which are just human versions of weird enchantments and artifacts. So Magus of the Moat is a white wizard that says only creatures with flying can attack. Right. That would be another category of just protecting my team until I can just do something great with all my sacrificing. I don't have it in the deck. Should I run something like Voltaic Key so I can untap target artifacts so I can get multiple uses out of those things? So I can untap my commander 2 or 3 times in a turn and then just get a lot of use out of them?
I think that sounds worth it, especially because we know you want to be untapping and tapping just as much as I do.
Yeah,
but you've got way more limited.
It only fuels the artifacts that fuel the commander. So I mean,
it's really like there's a bit of setup cost there.
Yeah, a little bit too much. And then the other thing that I'm not 100% sure about including is the Wizards Tribal as a whole. Like I really feel like listeners, I promise I'm always going to build a deck that's going to be budget. It's going to be on the theme as much as possible. If you want to make some tweaks to it, make it your own, go ahead and do that. We make them budget so you can just put the deck list into a store, have them send it to you no time, and then just start playing this deck right away. If I was to rebuild it, maybe I wouldn't be so tied to these wizards and just do more fun stuff.
Yeah. You were tied to the theme that we chose for the podcast specifically.
And that's what I promised to you, the listeners. I will honor the challenge. No matter how difficult, I will scrape together a fun-to-play deck out of anything I'm given.
Because I remember you were like, well, I'm having some trouble with this deck. It's like, there's not a ton of wizards, and like, it's, I don't know how good it is.
And a lot of them are bad.
Are we willing to talk about decks on the show that aren't very good, really? I think you got to a point where this deck plays, and it is fun to play, you said, right?
Yep, it's fun to play. That's my minimum. I'll promise you, right? We're going to make fun decks free to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And just seeing you play it, there's so many interactions with it. You really did get going against me.
Yeah, in a banned 1v1
In a banned 1v1 commander game, you really got going, and you drew a ton of cards off that Painseer. I'm happy that it turned out well, and it's good to know that at least you'll have a good time playing it.
So far, 100% hit rate. I want to build this deck and try it out.
So the next topic we have is cards that we missed. And last time I had some cards that you missed, but I don't have that this time. This time I have cards that I missed. And I missed them on purpose, so I just want to mention this because I know there's a lot of Derevi decks out there that will play Stasis and Winter Orb, and they'll sort of tap down everyone else's team and their lands and everything, but I get to untap because I have Derevi. I don't like those cards, and I don't want my friends and fellow Magic players to totally not be able to play Magic. That's just personally on me. You know, if someone were to sit down at a table, and we do have a guy who plays with us, Scott McCauley, when he sits down, he plays a Winter Orb in one of his decks. That's fine. That's totally fine. I'm not salty about that at all. I'm just not going to really include it in decks. I'd rather players being able to do stuff and not just sit there and go, are you done yet? My lands aren't untapping. Like, I'm not playing. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I wouldn't want to be in that situation, so I don't want to put other people in it. But that being said, honestly, if you want to throw those in your decks, go for it. If you want to try those out and if you think that's fun for you, go for it. I just know that that's not really something I want to do. So I miss those cards, and I miss them on purpose.
Fair enough. It's your deck. You build it how you want.
That's right. But I am fully aware of them and that they're really very good with Derevi, and it's a good combo.
So we like to talk about fun discoveries for the decks, and I kind of covered mine already. I couldn't keep it in. Like Thornbite Staff has some neat interactions. Merciless Eviction, super fun. And Reconnaissance, I think, is an all-star, and it's a super fun discovery for me. Are there any cards that you haven't talked about yet that are just some fun discoveries for your deck?
Yes, there are two that I haven't talked about and two that I did already. Two of the best discoveries for me were Revica and Beguiler of Wills.
For sure.
They're just crazy. I didn't know they existed, and they're amazing, especially in this deck. I think they're also fairly good in other decks, too, especially Beguiler of Wills. One I did discover is Vidalcan Aether Mage, which is a Future Sight card. It's 1 in a blue. It's a 1/2, has Flash. None of these abilities are relevant because we're going to be doing the other ability that this card has. No, not when Vidalcan Aether Mage comes into play, return target sliver to its owner's hand.
Not going to come into play much.
That's not going to not that ability. The third ability it has, which is Wizard Cycling for 3 colorless. So you can discard Vidalcan Aether Mage, pay 3, and tutor a wizard.
Great.
Who knew? You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean, God bless the Future Sight cards, man, because that's a very awesome ability for this deck, obviously, and it's an 18-cent card, so it's great.
Why is there no Cleric cycling?
Right? Why didn't they do more tribal cycling cards?
Yeah.
So Vidalcan Aether Mage is obviously really great in this deck. And another one that I didn't talk about at all yet is called Apprentice Wizard, and I really think this one's good in any deck. It's 1 and 2 blue for a Summon Wizard, so this is an older one. This is from 4th edition. He's a human wizard. He's an 0/1. He has the ability of pay 1 blue and tap him, add 3 colorless to your mana pool. So he's kind of like a little soul ring you have there. And of course, with our untapping and our abusing of that, we can get a lot of mana out of this guy. You just trade your 1 blue. You're going to net 2 colorless from this guy every time he taps and adds mana. It's great.
It would be tough for me not to put a couple of X spells in this deck. You got ways to just really abuse that.
Certainly do. I played this deck a bunch, and I had a good time with it. Bottom line, at the end of the show, do you like this deck?
You know what? With all the challenges, I do. I really like this deck. Andy and I will build these decks, and we'll play them phantomly. They're not actual cards yet, but I intend to build this deck. I think it's a fun deck to play for sure. I think I'm a Johnny at heart, definitely. I like when a lot of things are happening and crossing paths a couple different ways. Yeah, this deck is doing a lot of things on a lot of layers. I find that fun. I can sacrifice things. I'm draining life slowly or all at once. I'm sacrificing for huge creatures, and I'm just getting a lot of recursions, sacrificing for card draw. There's a lot going on. That, for me, is what's fun about this deck.
Yeah, and I got to say, I do like this deck a lot. I think it's really fun. The tribal thing even does come into play for me, luckily.
Yeah.
With your Obelisk Convert and all that kind of stuff. At first, though, I was going to take my current Derevi deck and transform it into a wizard deck. But I think that instead what I'll just do is take a couple of these wizard cards that I've discovered that are excellent, and I'm going to slide them into Derevi because I have like a bunch of unblockable guys and a couple of like pingers that aren't wizards. So like, why not just make those wizards? Like, I've got the fairy one that taps and does a damage, and I've got a 1-mana 1/1 like the Triton from M15 or something that is unblockable. Why not make that a wizard? Then we get that added bonus from Izami and some other tribal things. So I do like this deck. I'm not going to build this deck, but I am going to definitely take things that I learned about while building this and apply it to a current deck that I have. So this is the next question. How much did your deck end up costing?
I love this part. Running it through MTG Goldfish, which has a great deck pricing website. I ran a text list of my deck list through there, and on paper, it comes in at $45.10.
But that's including all the basic land, all the lands you included, and all the stuff that you might just have already kicking around your collection.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, and if you don't want Order of White Clay, you save $4 there. If you don't want Ghoul Color Gisa, if you got another token generator who's not a wizard, you save $3 or $4 there. Blood Artist goes up to $2 or $3. You can drop $10 off of this and still make it essentially the same deck quite effortlessly.
I also come in around the same. I'm at $56.50 on paper, again, via mtggoldfish.com. My most expensive cards are Patron Wizard. I've got Airtie, just a guy who pays 4 and taps and counter something, and I've got Order White Clay. You can cut this down to easily down to like $45 and still be very good and basically broken.
Lands included, a whole commander deck for $45. That sounds good to me. So that about does it for Wizards Tribal.
That's Wizards Week here on Commander's Brew.
I don't think we could ever do Shark Week. I don't think there's enough shark cards.
There is a shark, right?
Is there? I don't know.
I think there's at least one shark.
Well, if you know the answer, tweet us at Commander's Brew. We got a fun podcast planned for you next week, but as always, if you have any ideas, like if you want to see us take on an interesting commander or a weird theme or card to build decks around, we're happy to take those challenges.
You can also send us an email, commandersbrew@gmail.com. And you can follow us individually on Twitter also. I'm at Andy Hulbone.
And I'm at Sean Tabares.
Rate us on iTunes if you like the show. Give us a little star rating. Drop a comment. That would be very much appreciated. Until next week, though, y'all stay up.